are again. Weren't we just doing this year-end reflection a few weeks ago? Doesn't time fly? As I was preparing this talk, I was thinking, we just did this. However, it's been a year. And the year-end is just that perfect time to reflect, to think about what we've been up to the last year or the last however many years, and what we want to take with us and how we want to be in this upcoming year of 2016. And this year-end, excuse me, reflective time can give us a little urgency or a little extra impetus to do some self-examination, to have a look at what's working and what's not for us. And I think that's always a healthy thing. So time for reflection is not an original idea, but I think if it prompts us to pause, take stock, and initiate some change. I don't want to forget the third part of that. Take stock, pause a little bit, initiate some change. It's well worth doing. So thinking about how to take a fresh look at this year in reflection, I came across an email earlier this month from a wise friend, many of you also know, Dr. Carol Carnes. So I'd like to read, and with her permission, I sent her an email and said, hey Carol, can I borrow your idea and use it as the basis to flavor my talk on Sunday? She said, absolutely. She wished she could be here with us and hear the talk. So let me channel Dr. Carol. So on December 8th, Dr. Carol wrote, Dwayne, can you turn the mic off just for a second? Something really wants to be heard this morning. So dear friends, let's imagine we are on a large sailboat. Things went well for most of the trip, but suddenly we have inadvertently entered into shallow, rocky shoals. The captain shouts to all aboard, throw over all the baggage you have that is non-essential. We must lighten our load or we will be in terrible trouble. You would get busy and think nothing of heaving over practically everything you brought with you, knowing it could all be replaced. Your life is worth more than any possession. And she continued, now is a good time to assess what is non-essential in us as we close out this year and move into 2016. What are we taking with us into what can be seen spiritually as a blank slate? What is worth hanging on to? And what will do nothing but weigh us down, inhibiting our forward movement? Well, it's not that difficult to figure out, she says. Anything that elicits long-held feelings of sadness, hate, anger, resentment, hopelessness, or fear needs to be jettisoned. Anyone else ever experience, like me, some of those from time to time? We want everything to be sweetness and light, but we do fall into those from time to time. And back to Dr. Carol's words, imagine you are starting from an open field of awareness, which acts as the cause to your new year. What will you allow to be active in your inner life? She says we can carry memories of hard times, but like a dormant virus, if they're not active, they have no power. Memories in and of themselves are just old movies. It's how we react to them now that determine their capacity to interfere with our happiness, health, and prosperity. In other words, if we want our new year to be really new, we must release what is old and non-essential. In this sense, essential means, does this emotion, this feeling, idea, serve to reveal my true self? Do I believe I will not be me? I love this question. Do I believe I will not be me without my anger, my sadness, my fears? What will I carry along into tomorrow? That is the most important question we can ask ourselves in this month of the year. And then she closes her column, as she always does, stay tuned in, Dr. Carol Carnes. And I love that because she doesn't just mean stay tuned into her column, she means stay tuned in to your life, to your spiritual truth. So aren't those great questions? And they lead directly to my topic for today, which is anchors aweigh, preparing for the year ahead. So I took Dr. Carol's maritime analogy of throwing overboard what's not serving us well, and I carried it a little further. I also thought of some very corny things like, who's the captain of your ship? But I was coached out of delivering all of those. I'll spare you those. But I did land on two areas that I want to talk about today. One is how to decide what we want to throw overboard and what to keep. It's not always crystal clear, is it? What do we want to throw overboard and what do we want to keep? And the second is, what actions, what spiritual actions can we take to help us release that old baggage and sail forward? So first, how do we decide what to keep and what to toss overboard? So let me introduce two terms. I did decide to use the analogy a little. Let me reintroduce two terms to have some fun with as we look at what to toss overboard and what to keep in our lives. So the first one is flotsam and jetsam. Isn't that great? I love saying that. Flotsam and jetsam. Anybody know what that is?
No.
No? Somebody in the back does. What's flotsam and jetsam? Excellent! When I Googled it, I found The Little Mermaid, and I found a band called Flotsam and Jetsam, but I'm not going to talk about either of those. But the old version, the old meaning of the term flotsam and jetsam, is it is defined as the floating wreckage of a ship and its cargo, or floating cargo deliberately cast overboard to stabilize a ship in a rough sea. It also means worthless matter or worthless encumbrances. So we're going to be thinking about what's the flotsam and jetsam in our lives that we may want to toss overboard to stabilize our ship. The second word or phrase that I thought of to use was precious cargo. So while some things in our lives may be weighing us down and we'd be better off changing them or getting rid of them, I'm sure there are also things that lighten our journeys, that make our lives smooth sailing, like spending time with friends or family or any other activities you may be involved in that actually do feed you. And we consider those precious and worth holding on to. So flotsam and jetsam and precious cargo. So if we decide it's time to sort out flotsam and jetsam from precious cargo, where do we start? If you're like me and a lot of other people that I talk with here at the center and in other parts of my life, it's not always easy to tell what has served its time with us. Because everything we've experienced up until now has had some kind of purpose. We've invited it in for a reason. But what parts of our life are we done with that it's time to release and move on from? And what continues in our life to be life-affirming and fulfilling that we wouldn't want to jettison out of the boat? And maybe what new undertakings are we ready to take on that may lead to our next life adventure? So let's reflect, thinking of this idea of tossing and keeping. Let's reflect on three areas of life. You may think of a lot more after the talk. I wasn't trying to be comprehensive. I just wanted to bring up a few and ask some questions in those areas to get us thinking. So I'm just going to ask questions as a way of prompting to start thinking about what to pitch overboard and what you want to keep as you head into the new year with that spiritual clean slate. So in the domain of commitments and activities, what are you doing with your time and energy that's precious? Yes? The year flew. Our time is precious. What are you doing with your time and energy that is draining, that is not filling you up again, and might be good candidates as flotsam and jetsam? And what are you doing that is energizing, that keeps you moving, that fulfills you, that you may be considering as precious cargo? Some things to think about are volunteer work. I know lots of you are engaged in volunteer work here at the center or in other places. So in your volunteer work, are you helping others in ways that feel like sacrifice that you resent? Or do you feel fulfilled by making a difference in ways large or small? And I'm not saying that volunteer work or other commitments are always easy and light. They may in fact be quite demanding. But at the end of the day, at the end of the commitment, are you glad you engaged in it? Do you have that sense of, this was worth doing? I'm glad I was here. Preparing these talks takes some energy. It takes some time and some work. And inevitably, in the middle of preparing these, much as I love y'all, I'm at some point going, why do I volunteer to do this? Wouldn't there be an easier way to fulfill my purpose? However, every time I come here and deliver a talk, I think, oh yeah, that's why I do that. So it's a part of me to do this, and it's always fulfilling. Doesn't mean there isn't a little bit of work along the way. So ultimately, are your volunteer activities filling you as well as helping others? So for me, my volunteer work is precious cargo. And I used to be kind of like, I would volunteer for everything. Oh yeah, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. Now I'm a little more discerning. And I choose those arenas where I can give my gifts and I can also get that feeling of being rewarded. That's the precious cargo. So are there volunteer opportunities you want to consider flotsam and jetsam and it's time to move on? And are there ones that are precious cargo or precious cargo you want to take on? You've been nudged to thinking, oh gee, maybe I should be volunteering, or I'd like to volunteer here or there, or give my gifts in a certain way. Maybe it's time to step up and say, let me try that out. Let's see if that would be precious cargo. Another area of activities that I wanted to mention this morning is time with electronics. I've been reading some scary articles about how much time not only young people, but all of us are spending with electronics, including TV, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever your version, texting your friends. Do you feel drained or energized by the time that you spend with electronic devices? My niece actually works in social media. She does social media for a large organization, and she's very tuned in. So she uses Facebook quite a bit. But she realized recently that she actually had to change her settings because there's someone in her Facebook community that has been ranting and is very upset about something, and she realized that she was getting engaged in this and her energy was being drained. So she changed her settings and she's keeping the precious cargo of using Facebook in a smart way to keep in touch with her friends and family, but she's jettisoning the parts of it that were taking her energy away. So what parts of your use of electronic media are feeding you and what are not? I love television, and if I watch an hour or two of television a night, I feel like that was fun. It was relaxing. However, when I sit there like a zombie for 4 or 5 hours, this is not a good thing. So sometimes it may be a mix, what's flotsam and jetsam and what's precious cargo. And which of your many other activities, such as shopping, attending social functions, whatever other kinds of things you're engaged in, are annoying and meaningless, and which are satisfying and enjoyable? So it's useful just to take stock. Last Sunday I attended a concert that I invested 4 hours of my valuable time in, and I left feeling energized and satisfied and joyful. Of course, it was Amy Bishop and Oliver, Lisa and Michelle, so how could I go wrong? But watch for those activities in your life that cause you to feel good about being alive. So only you and I can answer what is flotsam and jetsam and what is precious cargo in our own activities and the commitments we choose to take on. But it's certainly worth thinking about. Another area of life I want to briefly mention is the area of relationships. I think that's one that takes a lot of everybody's energy. Very often when we do treatment, when I do treatment work, or when people talk to me, it's often about relationships. So what relationships are you engaged in that are unhealthy, unbalanced, and which of them are life-affirming and mutual? So are you in any relationships that are mostly filled with misunderstandings, arguments, poor communication, or even where you doubt the honesty of the other person or their sincerity? Or are your relationships mostly filled with clarity, respect, and trust? And I'm using the word mostly because our relationships ebb and flow. They have problems within them from time to time. But is the relationship mostly life-affirming or mostly not serving? Are you in relationships where you mostly listen and do not feel heard? Or do you enjoy a mutual exchange of thoughts and feelings? It's not about equal airtime, but it is about whether you feel heard. Are you in relationships where you feel criticized and restricted, or in ones in which you feel free to be yourself? When you think about your relationships, where is there flotsam and jetsam? Perhaps not the whole relationship, but some behaviors that might be changed in the relationship to make it stronger. And where is there a precious cargo in your relationships that you want to keep or renew? Maybe there are old relationships you've let fall by the side that you'd like to renew. Finally, the third domain that I want to have us think about this morning are spiritual practices. So in what ways do you feel disconnected, confused, or guilty? And when do you feel peace of mind and connected to your innermost self, to your higher power, to the world? Do you race around in the physical world, wondering why, and perhaps feeling a desire to slow down and experience life in a more meaningful way? And again, is this a prevailing thing for you? We all have that from time to time. We have a busy week, we get a little wild with our energy, we need to slow it down. But if this is kind of a prevailing thing, where you're thinking, you know, life is getting away on me and I really want to come back to that center, remember who I am. If you're feeling that, maybe now's the time to do some tossing and do some keeping. Do you feel successful but not significant? Are you aware that you matter? Or are you engaging in spiritual practices such as meditation, affirmations, prayer, walks in nature, attending services, singing, or there are many, many other spiritual practices you may be engaged in that feed your soul and remind you that you are a limitless being of love and light, expressing the magnificence of spirit. So I've asked a lot of questions. And these can be a good place to begin. Thoughtfully pondering and answering some of these will lead us to greater clarity and point us to areas we may want to make changes in. And there's also another approach we can take that is equally effective, and I'm not really advocating one over the other. If you like to do the reflection and notice the areas and change them, great. If you want to just start and get going on some different actions, doing that will also pull you forward. It will, trust me, if you start to do these spiritual actions, you'll start to notice where the flotsam and jetsam is and what areas you want to pay more attention to in your life. So either approach will work. Make sense? It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. And maybe it doesn't matter which one comes first, as long as we get cracking. I resisted the maritime jokes, but when that one came to me, I thought, I gotta use that. So I've been talking about how we decide what to throw overboard and what to keep. Now I'll talk about how we do get cracking. What actions can we take to help us release the old and sail forward? So there are 3 tried and true strategies. These are not brand new to you, but I want to remind you about them today. Gratitude, love, and forgiveness. Kind of some of the big 3. There's a lot of evidence within the science of mind, our own teaching, and all over the internet, you know, multiple books, all kinds of evidence that practicing these in combination or even practicing any one of them on a regular basis will absolutely change your life for the better. Now, I do have a spoiler alert. Change can cause upheaval. Anybody here experience that in your life? So sometimes change is smooth sailing. I don't want to set the idea in our minds that it has to be difficult. Some of the changes I've made in my life, even very big ones, were smooth sailing. It was an idea whose time had come and off I went and it was a thing of beauty. However, sometimes change disturbs the water and you may get tossed around a little bit. And if we follow the maritime analogy, it's like we're pulling up anchor and allowing ourselves to enter more freely into the current of life. And it may not be without obstacles. But I also was thinking, how boring, really seriously, how boring would it be if everything was always a glassy surface and smooth sailing all the time? I'm too Italian, too much of a drama queen to want a life that's quite that quiet. So the first spiritual practice I want to mention is to start doing more of gratitude. So we know, don't we, that gratitude is a very powerful, life-changing act. volumes through the ages have been written about gratitude. It's said that maybe the only prayer we ever need is gratitude. So let's just take a minute right now to practice gratitude. So silently, complete this sentence. In my life, I am grateful for. So where is your mind focused right now? How do you feel? How many of you had several things spring to mind just very quickly? It's so simple, yet so effective in lifting us from our present state of mind and into this mood of appreciation for the incredible life we have the privilege of living. When I remember to be grateful for the beauty of Memorial Drive on my ride to work in the morning, I set up a whole completely different day than when I don't remember to be grateful. There are millions of quotes on gratitude. Here are a couple. Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. And I said this had been around a long time. Cicero is attributed with that quote. And another one I love that I found on the internet was, gratitude bestows reverence, allowing us to encounter everyday epiphanies, those transcendent moments of awe that change forever how we experience life and the world. John Milton said that. So simple, and all we need to do is remember to do it on a regular basis, and it will change our lives. The second spiritual practice we can do more of is to cultivate and express love. There's so much to say about love. So I narrowed it down, and I want to just talk about one idea about love. And that is the idea that it is key to love ourselves first. When we start here, the expression of love to others flows. And when we skip this action, loving others in a generous and positive and life-affirming and clear way can be a challenge. There's an old... I want us to really affirm today that the idea of loving ourselves and loving others are complementary acts. They go together. That we're not going to run out of love. But if I love myself first, it's not going to stop here. If I am feeling loving thoughts toward me, I'm not going to get stuck here because it's our nature to be loved. So if I am feeling loved myself, and think about it for you. When you feel loved, don't you also then want to be generous and kinder and be there for other people? They just go together. So I want us to get away from this old religious idea that somehow we have to put others first. That's an old paradigm, and we're done with it. So let's be done with it in 2016. We're done with this idea that it's love them or love me, that they're separate or apart. Start here and let the love just flow from you. So I want you to repeat this affirmation after me if you would like to. What is good for me is good for all others in my life.